I spent more than half a decade buried in code before I finally figured out what it takes to actually become a CEO. Turns out it really comes down to 3 decisive traits that pretty much any software engineer can learn and master. So let me show you the step-by-step traits that I had to learn that helped myself, alongside a plethora of other developers, move from a 9-to-5 developer to a business owner or a CEO. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, for those of you who don't know me, let me introduce myself really quickly and then we'll get into the video. My name is Bago. I started my coding journey back in 2016 and this is me in 2017 winning the Los Angeles Regional for my robotics team. After which I went to UCLA as part of a summer program where I studied the human consciousness. And then after that, I went to NASA as an intern when I was 19 years of age as a computer engineer. After that, I actually joined the private sector, more specifically as a software engineering consultant. I went from a junior developer making low 6 figures, so about $120,000 total compensation. And in 3 years, I made manager making almost $250,000 a year with bonuses and everything included. And then after my 3 years in the private sector, November 30th, 2022, ChatGPT comes out. That's when I decide, okay, I'm gonna essentially put all my eggs into this basket. So I quit. I try entrepreneurship, and the only success that I really have is AB Analytics, which is my 7-figure B2B consulting firm. In the last month alone, we did about $777,000 in revenue. Keep in mind that this is revenue, not profit. I do not take this much home. I just want to point that out. I skipped a lot of wins, but even more losses. So if you're interested in that, check out my personal website, about.code2ceo.com to learn more. Without further ado, let's get straight into the topic of today's video. So these are the 3 traits that really took me from code to CEO. And if I had to kind of explain what these three traits are, it's 3 of the biggest contributions to what allowed me to make the shift from a 9-to-5 employer to becoming a CEO. And this is more about mindset and the way that I had to think, the way I had to approach problems, alongside a few actual concrete examples that I'll give you as we go through it. So we have a lot to cover, but we're going to go through them one by one. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about, the first trait, is what I call product-centric empathy. I know the name might sound a little bit complicated, but we're going to dive through it. First, we're going to talk about what it actually is, and then we'll talk about how to develop it and why it's even important. So what it is. Essentially, we have to understand that as software engineers, our empathy is usually directed at a technical problem. And it makes sense because that's what we're there for. We're there to solve technical problems. Somebody needs an application, somebody needs a software build, we go out and do it. So whenever you see a bug report, you can kind of feel the pain of the system's imperfection and you get satisfaction from fixing it. Other people also get satisfaction from, say, big O complexity, right? If they can get a smaller big O notation or a more linear one. They can make something faster, they can optimize it. Because you feel sort of the inefficiency of a system, you are able to feel empathy towards it. And when you make it work better, you get satisfaction from it. Now, this isn't just unique to software engineers. A mechanic might feel this for a car, right? A civil engineer might feel this for, let's say, the house they're working on or a structure they're working on. We as software folks feel this for software that we're writing. So our job essentially comes down to just making whatever machine that we're working with correctly. Now, a founder's empathy is entirely different, or a CEO's empathy is entirely different in this case. It's not necessarily about the machine or whatever it is specifically you're working on, but rather it's about the user's life outside of the machine. So you can think of it as the ability to feel your customer's problem so acutely that it becomes a personal obsession. So a good way to think about this is you stop asking, can I build this? And instead you start asking, well, should I build this in the first place? And will it genuinely move the needle on my customer's pain point? So that single question is really the switch that rewires your engineering brain that's used to kind of execute tasks that you get from higher ups to becoming more so a CEO and becoming more independent and autonomous in how you work. And it's really the key difference between building something cool just for the sake of it, and building something that people would willingly pay for. So this is the primary difference when people when people make side projects, they don't make any money with it. This is primarily why, is because they don't have product-centric empathy, right? Their empathy is usually directed at a technical problem and not specifically towards the customer and solving the customer's pain point. So the way you actually develop this is, well, it's not going to come from anything technical you're going to be doing. It's not going to come from looking at analytics dashboards. It's not going to come from watching a YouTube video, ironically enough. So you have to get out of your sort of IDE, right, and into the real world. And unfortunately, it's going to require actual conversations with people. Go and behold, the solution to most problems in this life are other people. So what I used to do is I used to schedule what I called pain interviews with people. And I used to do this every single week. And this was something that it was a non-negotiable for me. I had to do this. Essentially, it's a meeting with a customer or a prospect that I'm sort of trying to better understand their industry, whatever the case. It's somebody that has a problem. It could be in healthcare, it could be in law industry, doesn't matter. And I make a promise that I'm not going to try to sell anything in the meeting. Meaning I'm not going to try to be, salesman. I'm not going to come from afar with strings attached, whatever the case. The entire point of that meeting is so I understand the problem that they're facing better than they understand it themselves. So this might sound impossible. You'll be like, how can you understand somebody's problem better than they understand themselves? Well, a lot of the times, if you take a look at, for example, doctors, that's what doctors do. A doctor has to understand your pain, your problem better than you to be able to properly prescribe and guide you on how you can get better, right? Even though you're the one feeling the pain, the doctor has to understand that pain and that problem better than you to be able to guide you towards a safe recovery and a fast recovery. Similarly, instead of doctor and a patient that's coming with pain, we're a software engineer and we're helping out a prospect. So what you want to do is you want to ask for a story more so. So something like, walk me through the last time you had to do a specific task and tell me about it like you're telling a story. And you want to push for something specific, like what was the most frustrating part of that specific thing you were doing? And really drill into it. Really, what was the most annoying part of what you were working on? An example of this could be if I'm talking to a lawyer and they're describing their onboarding process for me, I'll ask, okay, tell me about it like you're telling a story. And they would go, okay, I wake up, I do this, and then I check my email, I look for these things, client calls, I tell the paralegal to do that and this. And as I'm hearing that story, I can see even on their faces, let's say I'm in person, whether they're a little bit agitated, where they might really focus on in the story, what part they're really focusing on. They could have skipped the first 4 hours really quickly and then that one specific moment of how they're calling the paralegal, like whatever the case. There's always that usual kind of like few spots where there's an annoyance behind it. And you want to tell them, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. Essentially what you're trying to do is really understand what the most frustrating part about their entire flow is. And when you do that, when you can understand their pain better than themselves, that's when you pretty much don't even have to sell because they'll sell themselves to you. So the best way to about this is to just trace the failed attempts. So what did you do to try to solve that? And then what happened when you tried to solve it, but it didn't end up working? And only end the conversation when you repeat their problem back to them in their own words and they say, yes, that's actually exactly it. And they're speechless. They don't know how else to kind of add on to what you essentially told them. So this ritual sort of turns very vague empathy into a direct felt experience that your prospect will know, okay, like this dude knows what he's talking about, or like he or she understands my problem, they can help me. Because as long as you make people understand that you understand their pain, there is nothing more that they need to be able to trust you and buy from you. That's the most important thing. So the way you do this is you listen. You don't try to solve. Okay? As an engineer, our instinct is to kind of hear a problem and immediately jump to a technical solution. Write up a pseudocode, start looking for different ways we can go about it, right? Divide and conquer, higher order thinking, all these things. What you want to do is you want to sort of resist that urge. So, you can solve that with a better caching strategy and a new API endpoint, right? Resist it. Sort of like a bite your tongue if you need to. Listen, absorb the emotion, and write down their exact words as you hear it. So fill pages with quotes like, I felt like an idiot because I couldn't find a button, or I wasted my entire morning on this, and capture that moment where it really hurts for them. So the workaround they tried, why it failed, and what happened then. And those exact words, not your own abstractions, are the raw material for what you will build next. So when you hold back on solutioning in the room, you discover the real constraint you actually need to remove. Because if you just hear about the problem and your first instinct is to jump to build a solution, you're going to build a solution based on your understanding of the problem and not what the actual problem is all about. the biggest amount of due diligence needs to be done on the problem, the specific pain point, as opposed to the solution itself. In fact, if you do the most amount of due diligence on a pain point, you literally take care of 90% of the solution because it just takes care of its own. So then you want to get to what I call synthesis. Now, what is this and why is it so important? Because as an engineer, we are trained to love complexity. We find joy in building very elegant and scalable systems, but our customers don't always buy elegant systems. They buy solutions to painful problems. They don't want a complex thing. We might build out a UI that looks cool, but then the regular person might not even know how to use it properly. You see this time and time again. So what we want to do is we want to take the interviews that we've done with all these individuals, and we want to translate it into a simple set of pains and outcomes in our own user's language. So essentially prioritize what cuts down a 30-minute meeting or a 45-minute meeting to a 30-second or 45-second sort of like moments. Kind of like, think of it like shorts. Like you have long form, you have short form. Kind of like shorts of their highest anxiety moments and the most embarrassing moments that they were talking about, or the most painful moments. And you want to use their exact phrasing in your own specificity, so when you adopt it, it's a lot more natural and obvious that you're talking about their pain point. And this keeps you relentlessly focused on the one thing that matters, human relief that shows up in the real world, because nothing else is important. Doesn't matter how quote-unquote bad your product is, as long as it does the utmost of relieving that pain, then it's a good product. Then it's pretty much the last thing when it comes to product-centric empathy. Should I build this? Because if you've done everything up to this point, you'll probably have an idea now that you can execute on, and what you need to ask yourself is, well, should I build this? So a perfect empathetic understanding is going to be useless if you spend your time building features that actually don't matter at the end of the day. And I'm sure you're familiar with this. How many projects have you shelved yourselves? How many things have you worked on that made pretty much not a single dime? So before you write a single line of code, I want you to run sort of this gate that you set up in your head during the pain interviews. You ask yourself, should I build this? Will it genuinely move the needle on their pain right now? If the answer isn't an immediate and clear yes, you do not build it just yet. You go back to the quotes and back to the drawing board and find the moments that actually ruined their day or ruined their workflow, whatever it is that we're talking about. So build the thing that removes that moment instantly and make sure that you can see the result quickly. So this is how product-centric empathy becomes traction and not just some feature creep that you're going to add on to your product at the end, and how a cool project can become a real business. Let me give an example of this that I had just yesterday. We were talking to a logistics company. They are in charge of sort of like freights. So they mainly do the Amazon deliveries to the Amazon warehouses, which means they kind of post sort of like a job, and they have different trucking companies call them up and say, hey, I can take this load for say $3,000 or $3,500. Now, the time it takes for them to post the load, immediately thereafter, like within the first 5 minutes, they start getting bombarded with a bunch of phone calls. 90% of these phone calls don't go anywhere because it's just people trying to lowball them. And only 10% of these phone calls are actual people who are trying to give a real offer. The problem this logistics company was having, the transportation company, was that they were not able to sift through all the calls in the amount of time that they needed to not only get the best offer, but also to not waste their precious time on lowball offers. So what they needed was something to fix that immediate pain point. And of course, we helped them kind of set up an AI voice agent to sift through all the calls, answer it through AI, and then if it was a proper actual offer, then it would sort of transfer it over to a real human, where a real human would pick it up and start talking. But that was the biggest pain throughout their entire day. That was their most hated moment. When they post a job for a trucking company to come and move their stuff to the warehouse for a certain amount of money, they wanted to make, obviously, the most amount of money. But they kept getting so many phone calls, the owner was not able to answer all of them. And even if he was answering, he didn't know if he was answering a good one or a bad one. So this way, the AI would take care of that. And that was their biggest pain point. That was what he focused on. That was what he said stressed him out the most. That was what he literally hated doing the most. We fixed this. He now loves his job. That's an example of product-centric empathy in real time. Next, let's get to the second trait. Now, the second trait is all about asymmetric leverage. You've probably heard me talk about this pretty much every single video, because this is the most important trait that you have to comprehend as a software engineer. Funnily enough, this is something like where we're too close to it and we're kind of blind to see it. Oftentimes, we were born into this thing, and we're so close we can have tunnel vision, so we don't understand it, even though we are the ones who should understand asymmetric leverage the most. So first and foremost, let's understand what asymmetric leverage is and the mindset behind it. So asymmetry is when an input and an output are wildly out of proportion. Makes sense. Let's say for every 1x, you have 100y, okay? And leverage is the tool you use to create that asymmetry. I think Archimedes famously said, right, give me a lever long enough and I can pretty much lift the world. And this is sort of what leverage is. And asymmetric leverage is what we're trying to understand here. As a founder or as a CEO, your entire job is to find the points of leverage where a 1 hour input can create a 100 hour output in value. As a software engineer, this is completely new to you because your work is linear. You put in 40 hours of work and you produce roughly 40 hours worth of features, or at least that's what you're getting paid for. Hell, many of you, myself included back in the day, would put in overtime, but because I was on a W-2, I would not get paid for that overtime. So a lot of the times it was linear, but in a fraction in a sense, meaning I would put in, let's say 80 hours of work, but only get paid for the 40, right? Or I would put in, I don't know, 60 hours of work, make millions of dollars from the company, but I would only get paid for that 40 at a set rate. So all it really ends up being is you're just a highly paid, highly skilled cog in this machine. And your job is just to turn the crank. A founder's job is not to turn the crank. It's to find a better crank, or better yet, to get the same result with no crank at all. And it's the obsessive search for the 1% of effort that will generate 99% of the results. This is the psychological leap from employee to entrepreneur. And I want everybody to pay careful attention to this and really understand this. One of the best ways of sort of understanding asymmetric leverage, especially for me, the way I kind of got more in line with it, because I can talk about leverage all this time, but until you see it happen in your own life, it's going to be very different, right? They say experience is the best teacher. As a result, you're going to need to experience it to kind of understand it best. But a good way to think about it is take a look at pretty much all of human advancements. Most human advancements were done by a very small subset of people. Essentially, pretty much like 0.0000000, I don't know, this is like, I'm eyeballing here, but probably even more, percent of the human population is responsible for 99% of the investments. And this is what goes down in the history, right? When you hear about, let's say, Newton, right, all these guys, they are a very small subset of humanity, and they contribute to, let's say, 99% of all our advancements. Now, are there side characters? Are there sort of heroes behind the scenes? Yes, there are, of course. A lot of the times, history just overshadows them. But nevertheless, in terms of human contribution, what the average human has done for society, for the betterment of the world, it's not too much. You usually have very few humans in a specific, let's say, century, so 100-year time frame, that really make up the most progress. For example, in our time frame, I don't know where you and I are going to be, but in our time frame, we've had people like Musk, we've had people like Bezos, we've had people like Zuckerberg, right? These 0 to 1 founders who have created a large shift that's pretty much changed the lives of everybody on the planet. It's examples of these types of individuals. So think of asymmetric leverage kind of like that. Instead of a human being making these big changes, think of your hours. What can you do with that 1 hour to create the most amount of output, right? So let's talk about where the leverage actually is, because it's kind of difficult to visualize it unless you know what you're looking for. And leverage is really everywhere. And that's sort of why it's kind of hard to see, is because you're too close to it and you're not seeing it, you're tunnel visioned. So leverage exists in code. So all of you are familiar with this. You can write one script that automates a 10-hour manual process, and you can run that every single day. Media, this exact YouTube video, I recorded it once, but it's going to be watched by hundreds, thousands, maybe hundreds, thousands of people for eons to come. Well, not eons, but you get my point. Capital, so using investment to hire 10 engineers who can build faster than I can alone. People, hiring somebody who is better at a task than I am, right? So the engineering brain often sees these as shortcuts or not real work. However, the founder brain sees them as the only work that matters. Once again, this is extremely important. As a software engineer, I used to have this very negative mindset of, I am the only one who can do these things. I am the only one who knows my business. I am the only one who can do X, Y, and Z. I'm the only one who can code this and that. We get used to that because of our abilities. So it's kind of like suffering from success in a sense. But I had to understand there are people who can do one singular thing better than me. Maybe overall, I am the person best fit to run my business. Yes, that is why I am the CEO. However, if this person is better at accounting than me, I need to put that person in the accounting position. If this better is a better coder than me, I need to put that person in a position of CTO or a coder, right? That's how I had to start thinking. There are people better than me at other things, and my job isn't to compete with them. My job is to see them and get them on my team and leverage them. That's what my job is. So that's what all these Fortune 500 companies are doing. And this leverage multiplies outcomes without multiplying hours, because you're not working more, you're working the same amount, but now you're getting a lot more in return. And that's the only game a founder can really win. Because once again, understand, every single one of us have 24 hours in a day. It doesn't matter who is necessarily working harder, because we can only work as hard as 24 hours a day. And we can only do that for so long until we pass away, because we're not going to be able to sustain that. So in terms of work hard, there is a limit. What there isn't a limit to is leverage. How much input to output kind of value can you create in terms of disproportionate returns? So then it comes down to the daily operating question. To master leverage, you need to wage war against linear work that you've been used to your entire life. Every single morning, you need to ask yourself one question. What is the one thing that I can do today that makes everything else easier or irrelevant? So that question forces you to look for leverage points in your day-to-day life. So let's say you're currently at a 9-to-5 day job. Your brain will say, okay, I'm going to close out 5 tickets, 5 Jira tickets. That's relatively linear. The founder's brain will answer differently. They'll think, okay, could I spend a few hours making a lead magnet that attracts 100 ideal clients, saving 50 hours of sales calls? So instead of manually calling up clients, right, and trying to sell them, could I make a lead magnet that's going to take me a few hours, publish it online, or maybe share it and get 100 ideal customers that way? Could I create a better onboarding flow that answers the top 3 support questions, saving my support team 10 hours a week forever? Could I write a clear project brief so a freelancer can work for 2 days without asking me a single question and bothering me for my tasks? You essentially trade task completion for asset creation. These are known as SOPs, standard operating procedures, and a plethora of other things. Nevertheless, your daily operating system should always be not what do I do today, but rather what can I do today to make today's work easier and irrelevant, and what can I do today to make yesterday's work seem like it was a waste, from the perspective of, wow, I was so much more productive, I was so much more efficient today than I was yesterday. You're always trying to beat yourself from yesterday, and you're always trying to make today's work be done faster and easier and more leveraged. That's how you continuously have to think. And there really is a rule to this that I found personally. Set a simple rule. So no more than 2 hours of linear work per day. So linear work I consider coding. I know we just talked about how it's high leverage work, but for us as software engineers, believe it or not, coding is linear. Answering one-off emails and reacting to tickets. So the remaining 68 hours need to go to high leverage activities. And at first, it's going to feel wrong. It's going to feel like you aren't working. It's going to feel like you aren't being productive. But you keep the rule anyway, because soon the results will become undeniable. Your business will start growing on its own, powered by systems and assets that you created, not by your direct hourly effort. And your leverage compounds while linear work resets to 0 every single morning. And that is why this rule exists. To give an example of how this worked, when I first started my company, I was the one fulfilling. And I thought, okay, fulfilling is very important because I'm coding. And coding is a high leverage task. And if I don't fulfill, my clients are going to be happy and I'm going to get not paid essentially. But I didn't realize that, wait, I can just create SOPs. I can create documents where people can come read. I can create videos. I can have a better onboarding process where I onboard a new employee. They're able to do exactly what I do. And hell, if I hire somebody better than me at coding, someone with more technical experience, they'll be able to do what I'm doing much better. Because at the end of the day, I know I'm not the best coder in the world. So that's when I started realizing, I'm like, okay, I need to rewire my brain to do this. So I set myself pretty much a limit. Initially, I started off with actually only 3 hours, and then I brought it down to 2. So no more than 2 hours of linear work. You still have to do the linear work every now and then. Because first off, there's the matter of trust. You can't trust somebody else to kind of read your emails and take care of the important stuff. And sometimes that becomes the high leverage work. So for me, people might say you have a lot of, let's say, calls. For me, that's the leverage work, because for me, spending 30 minutes of my time to having a call can literally be down the line the decision between a multi-million-dollar deal or a multi-$100,000 deal. So that's why for me, that's high leverage. So let's close it off with why this matters more than pretty much anything else that we've talked about thus far. As a founder, your only limited resource is time, okay? This is literally the only thing that's holding you back. It's not knowledge, it's not intellect, it's not talent, it's none of these things. Because fundamentally, everybody is capable of anything. Now, I'm gonna put a caveat there. If you're born healthy, you have 2 arms, 2 legs, a working, functioning brain, right? You're good. And you need to understand that you cannot win by outworking everybody. There will always be somebody willing to work just as hard or harder. And I use this example always. Since the time Jesus was born, for 2,225 years, if you made for every single day $500,000 a year, you would not be wealthier than Elon Musk. And Elon Musk isn't even the wealthiest man in the world. There are literally trillionaires out there. So let that sink in. Think about that. For every single day for the last 2,000 years, you wouldn't be wealthier than him. What does this say about leverage? That's what I mean, okay? You cannot win by outworking. That's never gonna happen, because people can only work so hard. There's a limit to it. Your only limited resource is time. You need to expand your time such that your 1 hour isn't actually 1 hour. You need to make it so your 1 hour is actually 100 hours or 1,000 hours. Do you think Elon Musk's 1 hour is the same as your 1 hour? Or Jeff Bezos' 1 hour is the same as your 1 hour? No, definitely not. Best way to think about it is think of it in terms of monetary value. Most of you are, let's say, in the $60 to $200 range per hour, right? Now, somebody like Bezos would probably bare minimum, I want to say about $400,000 per hour range, if not more, okay? So you can only win by out-leveraging them. And keep in mind, there is no limit to leverage. Leverage is infinite, okay? And asymmetric leverage is how you scale beyond yourself. It is a difference between building a job for yourself and building an asset that will work for you. And it is the engine of all exponential growth. When you run every single day through the leverage filter that we just talked about, the 2-hour thing, you will stop turning the crank and you will start building the machine that turns the crank for you, so you don't have to do it manually. And last but not least, the last trait that we're going to talk about is decisive inaction. Now, a little before this is actually a very new trait that I want to talk about. This is something that I understood more, I want to say, this year. And specifically, it's a little counterintuitive, so I'll get into this and then I'll talk about it at the end, what the story that I was going to say. But the final trait is decisive inaction, and it's the conscious, strategic choice to not do something that seems like a good idea. Key word here, not do something, okay? As a software engineer, we are professional problem solvers. We see a ticket, we want to fix it. We see an inefficiency, we want to optimize it. Our instinct is to act. A founder's instinct must be the opposite. Your primary role is not to solve problems, it's to protect the company's focus, right? Your focus is the customer. So for every one thing you choose to do, you must choose to ignore 99 other things, because that's what opportunity cost is. And this is not laziness, this is leadership. And it is a discipline to keep your hands off the keyboard when your attention is a scarce resource that the business cannot afford to waste. This is most commonly known as shiny object syndrome. And this is, I think, more important than ever, because even 5 years ago, it wasn't nearly as bad. With the rise of social media and the internet, brain rot content and all these things and all these opportunities, this is only going to get worse and worse. I think the hardest part about starting a business, even though it's never been easier to start a business and make a lot of money, at the same time, it's never been harder because there are so many distractions, so many shiny objects that are kind of fighting for your attention. So we need to protect our focus, okay? And focus is not a slogan. It is a filter that decides what lives and what waits in our lives. The most early stage companies do not actually die because they have no opportunities. They die because they have way too many opportunities. They die from indigestion and not starvation. And decisive inaction is how you prevent that. So it means saying no to customers you like when the request pulls you off the one outcome that matters this week. It means ignoring new shiny platforms when your launch date is 7 days away. It means letting small fires burn while you put out the big one that could actually sink your ship. And it feels like heresy to an engineering brain that equates value with fixing, but the company does not always need every single problem solved immediately. It needs the right problem solved at the right time. Because, newsflash, let me tell you something about starting a business, you will always have problems. Now, business is an infinite game, okay? Business is infinite, meaning there's always something you can optimize. There's always something you can do better. There's always something you can change, always. But you have to understand, you need to focus on the biggest one and the most important one day to day. Right now, for my own business, for the YouTube channel, there are so many things I could be doing. Better titles, better thumbnails, better scripting, better video ideas, better all these things. For my business, increase my conversion rates, increase my LTV, increase all these things, reduce my customer acquisition cost, fulfill better, make better SOPs, market more, create another YouTube channel for it, run more ads, run more cold emails. I can do all of these. But what I have to do is I have to take a look as a founder. Okay, I have all these problems out here. How many did I create for myself? How many are actual problems I have to tackle that can sink the ship? Okay, let me drink a quick sip of water. So the way I actually combated this was introducing what I call the weekly focus framework. And every single Monday, I would write down the one and only thing that will determine if my week would be a success, such as launching a new pricing page or shipping the onboarding fix that cuts time to value from 30 minutes to 5 minutes, or record a demo that closes the enterprise deal. Then the entire week would run through a single question. Does this help me launch the pricing page? If a customer asks me for a feature, no, it doesn't, so I add it to the backlog. Is a new social platform blowing up? Should I go on it? No, ignore it. If a teammate wants to refactor a piece of legacy code, does that have anything to do with it? No, it doesn't move the one thing that we need to do. So you are not necessarily saying that these other ideas are bad or these other problems aren't important. You are saying that they are not the job for this week. So you prove focus by shipping the one thing on Friday and measuring its impact the next week. Let me give you a very clear-cut example of this. This week, right now, this is a Sunday that I'm recording this on. Tomorrow will be Monday. I know for my firm that I have to start actually marketing a lot more. More specifically, we want to work with bigger clientele. Since we are based in sort of LA in a local enough city, for us to get the attention of the bigger guys, we need a little bit more authority, so to say. We have gotten bigger guys, but it's mainly been through network. And of course, your network can only take you so far. You have to do things to kind of put yourself out on the map. So we have to do a little bit more marketing in the perspective of uploading content, showcasing all of our wins, showcasing all of our testimonials, showcasing everything that we've done to try and get the bigger guys. So I know that starting Monday, my primary focus will be on ideation and content creation for the firm. Now, there's going to be a bunch of other things that are going to be happening. There's probably going to be, somebody asking me about fulfillment, somebody asking me about the cold emails, if I want to crank that up, somebody asking me about this or that. I need to consciously ignore those and ask myself, does this help with this? No? Move on. Does this help with this? No? Move on. Does this thing over here help with this? Yes, it does. Okay, let's add it, consider it. Okay? That's how you're supposed to do it. You set essentially kind of like a success goal for the week. What would contribute to success for that week? And you do that one specific thing. You solve that one specific problem. And you go all in into it until it is done. For the YouTube, for example, this is Sunday. I'm most likely going to record 2 to 3 videos today because I know I'm not going to have time the rest of the week to work on it. So what I need to do is I need to sit down and record these 3 videos. This is one of the 3 that I need to record. I still have 2 more. I'm going to ask myself questions. Okay. Do I maybe work on something with AB right now? Do I respond to that email back there? Do I, read this? Do I do that? No, because none of these things that I'm going to be doing are going to be contributing to the main problem that I chose to sit down and solve. So I'm not going to focus on those, okay? So you need to learn to let go to go faster. And this is decisive inaction will feel wrong at first. It was one of the weirdest feelings that I've ever had in my life. I don't know how to quite describe it. It just feels wrong, but it's at the same time, it feels right. So you will leave minor bugs unfixed. You will leave tighter refactors undone. You will resist just a quick tweak that balloons into a last afternoon. And you will choose not to answer some emails until the daily block is done. And then your velocity on the thing that matters will actually jump significantly because all the good ideas that used to fracture your attention are now parked behind a gate. And you will see this compound in real time. 1 page shipped beats 10 pages half started. 1 release that moves a metric beats a week of busy work that nobody even knew about and that moved nothing. And you need to understand that this is not procrastination. In fact, it is focus that produces measurable outcomes. You need to learn how to let go to go faster. Very, very important, right? Sometimes you need to take a step back to take 10 steps forward. And last but not least, why this sort of completes the system that we just talked about. Decisive inaction, think of it as like a shield that makes the other traits work. Without decisive inaction, these other traits will not come to fruition nearly as well as they could, okay? It ensures that your product-centric empathy is pointed at the right pain, not diluted across side quests, and it ensures your asymmetric leverage is applied to the highest leverage point, not scattered across tasks that reset to 0 every morning. It protects your time, your energy, and your team's momentum. It is also the ultimate expression of strategy, choosing what not to do. So when you practice it every single week, you stop building for the sake of motion and you start building for the sake of impact and actually moving the needle. So this is how you move from solving problems to setting direction. And this is how you go from a busy engineer to a focused founder or CEO. And I promised that I would tell a story with regards to the decisive inaction that I learned about recently. So when I started the YouTube channel, this one as well as the main one, I pretty much didn't have any time. Most of you watching this will know that this started as a daily channel. So I was uploading daily on this. But I was literally running out of time in the day because I mentioned that time is my only limited resource. And I had to kind of ask myself a question. Okay, is spending this extra time making these videos worth it? Is it the highest leverage thing I could be doing? It was not. So I had to cut it off immediately, despite me liking making these videos, right? I love doing this stuff. So the one thing that I continuously even have to work on is this myself, okay? These ones, I want to say for the sake of this video, I have them pretty much on lock, especially product-centric empathy. Asymmetric leverage, I learn more and I gain more knowledge. I learn about more leverage stuff, higher leverage stuff I can be doing. But decisive inaction, to this day, still surprises me by the sheer amount of no's that I have to say, sheer amount of things that I have to consciously not do to really protect my focus and work on the one thing that matters. And it's interesting the way it works. The universe sort of understands the more successful you're about to become, or the second you're going to have your big break, it gives you even more stuff, more shiny objects for you to see and for you to respond to. And you have to consciously say no to it. I think this is one of the most important things. And honestly, this is going to get harder and harder as we progress, especially now with AI. And frankly, this is why I also preach about AI a lot and say, use it. Because AI will help you with this decisive inaction. For example, all of this writing right here that you see, most of it is done through AI, right? Now, of course, I still train it on it. I use my own custom AI for it. I don't use GPT or Gemini or any of these things. It's trained on all my videos, the way I speak, the way I dictate, right? It's trained on my voice. It's kind of trained on my own brain, so to say. But nevertheless, I would not spend the time writing these out manually because it would not be the highest leverage thing. And even though I want to do these myself, I'm going to sit down and write it. The decisive inaction in me tells me, no, just write it out. And when you speak, because it's still your own mind, it's still your own thoughts, you'll be able to convey the right message through the screen that the people need to hear. So that is why a lot of stuff I talked about was slightly, not different, I would say, wasn't included too much in the writings here. Once again, all about leverage, okay? So if you can really understand these 3 traits as a software engineer, you will become a very successful founder and a proper CEO. So product-centric empathy, asymmetric leverage, and decisive inaction. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, let me know down in the comments below. If you have any questions, ask them down in the comments below. And as always, I will see you in the next one.